Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, November 24th, 2020. It's a busy day. It's so busy, in fact, that Joan McCarter won't even be able to join us. That's how busy it is. I don't know who took care of the scheduling, but I blame them and Donald Trump, I suppose. Busy day over at the front page of Daily Kos, and lots of people on vacation. It being a holiday week. I don't know what the holiday is expanding. Well, I remember when I was a kid. Yeah, I remember the first time, I think, that they gave us off on the Wednesday preceding Thanksgiving in order to travel somewhere, and I think it's kind of expanded ever since then, and now we have people off the whole week, and what are you doing, where are you going? You shouldn't even be having people over. There's not even people you have to cook for. Who needs a vacation? Come back. We want Joan. But okay, it's just not going to work out today. My eye taken off the ball this morning by someone tweeting out. Was it Eric Bollard, I think, responded? It was the first one I saw responding to it, although I bet he's probably 100th in line, responding to a Washington Post opinion piece being tweeted around. Opinion, Biden's voter margin in key states wouldn't fill the Rose Bowl. That will affect how he governs. And, of course, Eric making the point that George W. Bush's margin of victory in Florida wouldn't fill a diner. Of course, his real margin of victory at the Supreme Court wouldn't fit a large SUV, or fill a large SUV anyway. But, people pushing back all over the place. Of course, I was just wondering how many, it's a stupid piece, I'm sure, and I don't even know. Maybe we'll look at it just to see who wrote it, and you can blame them for it. My question, of course, how many Rose Bowls do we need to fill to fit the COVID dead that Trump ignored, that he played golf while they were dying and allowed Jared to run his War Dogs corruption scheme, allowed Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue to profit off of insider trading from classified briefings on COVID. And, of course, we're up past 262, going on 263,000 dead, according to Worldometers today. Actually, I have some articles tucked away in pocket that we haven't gotten to yet on the latest studies on excess deaths. I'm sure the true number is probably over 300,000 by now, and only looking to climb as everybody asserts their freedom to get together for Thanksgiving dinners that will kill most of the relatives that they were hoping to see again by Christmas. But okay, whatever. I would say it's your choice, except you're killing all of us as well. And that kind of sucks, and maybe you shouldn't be allowed to do that, et cetera, et cetera. I happened to see this morning, maybe we'll just take a stroll down Twitter memory lane here before heading into what we've stored away. But let's see. Who did I see this morning retweeting this, and thought I would share it with all the rest of you via Twitter. Didn't know I was going to talk about it on the air, but here we are. Our good friend, Illusory Tenant, retweeting Oren Kerr, who, we've mentioned on the air a couple times, not somebody I'm frequently retweeting, but here it is. But Illusory Tenant sets it up this way. The great thing about Twitter is your congressman, it's not my congressman, thank God, it's Dan Crenshaw, the eye patch guy that we're talking about now. Really, by the way, owes his fame and his career to the Pete Davidson joke about him looking like a porn hitman, and then feeling bad about the joke and bringing him on Saturday Night Live. And now we find out he's just kind of a dick, and he's a dick all the time. And go back to the old joke about he looks like a porn hitman. I think we're all supposed to think, he's a big hero for everything and everything that he says and everything he ever does because of his military service, and, good job on the military service. I don't know what else to say about this guy. And then he came back and he was a jerk. So he was a guy who did a good, and by the way, in my audience, about 50-50 who will say, yeah, by the way, thanks for the military service. And the other half will say, if we had needed defending here in the homeland of the United States, thanks for joining, but the war you fought was kind of BS. But anyway, that's another show. He opened his mouth where he should really be wearing a mouth patch, quite honestly. That would help him a lot more. Or something on his hands, maybe some big, thick gloves to prevent him from typing on Twitter. Illusory Tenant saying, the great thing about Twitter is your congressman, in this case, Dan Crenshaw, can say something really dumb, ta-da, and then get corrected by one of the foremost Fourth Amendment scholars in the country. Armando just fell out of his chair, I think. I don't know whether he would classify Oren Carr as one of the foremost Fourth Amendment scholars in the country, but he's a scholar, and he sometimes comes to the fore. Anyway, Crenshaw's comment, just to trace this all the way back, yesterday, complaining about the Thanksgiving restrictions. That's how we got here. Prosecuting people, he says, for holiday gatherings inside their own home violates the Fourth Amendment, protection from unreasonable search and seizure. Elected leaders who violate the Constitution should be held accountable, and law enforcement should disobey unconstitutional orders. Gosh, there's a lot packed into that. Oren just starts with the first part. No, it doesn't. We're done there. But the Fourth Amendment might require a warrant to enter a home. Just remember what the Fourth Amendment is really all about. I mean, it might violate your freedom of assembly in some way. But anyway, it doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment might require a warrant to enter the home, depending on the circumstances, but it doesn't prevent prosecution of unlawful conduct inside a home, whether it's on a holiday or any other day. Whatever. He's an idiot. Crenshaw doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't know whether he claims to be a lawyer as well as a warrior king and porn hitman. But didn't do a very good job with this one. I don't know how much legal training they give Navy SEALs. Probably next to none. I mean, great accomplishment and everything, just physically. I don't know if it was necessary for the situation we were in. But anyway, don't do the Fourth Amendment analysis. This doesn't work for you. Fourth Amendment, prevents the government from making, as they say, unreasonable searches and seizures. But if you commit a crime inside your house and there's evidence presented of it in court that doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment, that is, it wasn't gathered using unconstitutional means, a neighbor reports you. I mean, I don't think that's a nice idea to do. And some local authorities are saying that you should do that. I mean, you kind of should, because the law should, the rules should be obeyed so that we can all survive. But I don't know if I really want to counsel people to snitch on their neighbors. That's nothing really good is going to come of that. And it's too late probably to prevent the illness from spreading locally by the time you catch somebody and report them and police do something about it. So I don't know. On balance, I think probably not a great idea. Anyway, Professor Kerr points out here the Fourth Amendment is about how you get into the home to gather the evidence. But once the evidence is gathered, there's no protection against being prosecuted for crimes that you commit in your house, either because it's a holiday or there's a Charlie Brown special for that day, or it has nothing to do with it. He totally misunderstands it, just as they do with the First Amendment. And, the next thing, Crenshaw will be complaining that it's a First Amendment violation for Kerr to have corrected him on Twitter. Anyway, like I say, everything in disarray today, so a little bit of a pause now and again to have the still warm mint tea that will sustain me through this morning's diatribe and the absence of Joan McCarter today. The lamented absence. I think I'll probably lament that 5 or 6 times to get through the day. All right, let's see. Where are we here? Boy, so many interesting things happening at the last minute here. Bill, who plans his interesting things to happen at around the opening bell, if you will, and we do have a bell, opening bell of the show, lets us know, as the bell does, that the Kagro in the Morning radio show is now live. So welcome to it. Hey, are you ready for cute kooks brandishing guns on the house floor? Kagro X, that's me, by the way. That's how you can reach me on Twitter. Says that you can get your wish soon. Pew pew, partner. Excellent. It's true and good news. Saw this morning from another of our favorite Twitter correspondents, because it gives us a chance to say things like this on the air. One of our favorite tweeters who makes us a little uncomfortable every time we have to call out his name, left-leaning cock. there you have it. Points out that, pointing to the real story here, which is the headline, gun-toting Congresswoman-elect may carry Glock at Capitol. And I think I anticipated this for some time now. We'll get right to that story. But he was pointing out left-leaning cock was. Not Glock, but cock. It's true. That I guess his actual representative, Joe Cunningham of South Carolina, got cited for bringing local craft beer to the floor as a prop. Now they're going to let nutcases who think Democrats are lizard, pedo, vampires be strapped in Congress. And the answer is yes. Yes, they will. I was saying also this morning, I'm so old. I remember when Congresswoman Frederica Wilson had to get a special waiver of the rules to allow her to wear her trademark hats on the House floor. That was like a big deal. We got to change the rules. We got to waive the rules against this so that a congresswoman can wear a hat. Now, I think the implication of the article is that we won't have to change the rules in order to allow a congresswoman to carry a gun on the floor. But the article does point out she actually won't be alone in this. And that probably shouldn't surprise you. And if it does, I don't know. Surprise, I guess, is all I can say. And gun-toting Congresswoman-elect may carry Glock at Capitol, Alan Fram of the Associated Press reports. I have a local ABC News piece here from I don't even know where. Maybe that's left-leaning Cox local TV station. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Do you want to know? It's WPDE. You want to look that up? It feels like it might be a South Carolina thing because of the PD. Get it? Maybe you don't get it. There's a river. PD River. Anyway, so they might. That would be a nice, clever thing. Plus, the weather looks like it's probably right for South Carolina. Look it up. Tweet me. Let me know. I won't spend time on it now. Here's the deal. I sound like Biden now. A firearms-toting Congresswoman-elect, and there are several of them, and there are two of them who are firearm-toting QAnon weirdos. But this one is the one from Colorado who owns the Shooters Cafe, the gimmick of which was that all the wait staff wore sidearms. So like Frederica Wilson, who had trademark cowboy hats, she has a trademark cowboy-ish sidearm, but she wants to bring the Glock. Because reasons. Anyway, firearms-toting Congresswoman-elect who owns a gun-themed restaurant in Rifle, Colorado, and I guess really just has nothing else going on in her life, has already asked Capitol Police about carrying her weapon on Capitol grounds, her office has acknowledged. If she does so, she apparently won't be alone. The practice is allowed for lawmakers with some limitations. Under decades-old congressional regulations, the public is barred from carrying weapons in the Capitol, its grounds, and office buildings. Republican Lauren Boebert, 33, all of 33 years old, elected this month from a conservative Western Colorado district after gaining notice as a brash pro-gun activist, otherwise known as crazy nutcase pro-gun activist, who straps a Glock pistol to her hip. So she's not even cowboy about it. Okay? Mint tea. Just making this gunplay so much more acceptable to me. All right. In an upset last June, she defeated five-term Representative Scott Tipton, who probably deserved it, for the GOP nomination, in part by claiming he wasn't an ardent enough backer of President Donald Trump, who lost. So, there's that. Anyway, Boebert asked Capitol Police officials about carrying her weapon when she and other House freshmen taking office in January were in town recently for orientation programs, according to two congressional officials. Both people, a Democrat and a Republican, spoke on condition of anonymity to describe her crazy lunatic request. They were anonymous about this. Okay. Aides to Boebert, who Trump endorsed as a fighter, who will, quote, never bow down to the establishment in Congress, even though no one will ever ask her to, did not make her, aides did not make her available for an interview. She shot them. The last guy who made her available for an interview got killed. Let's see. There's a pull quote here that says this was a private discussion and inquiry about what the rules are, and as a result, the Congresswoman-elect won't be going on the record, Boebert aide Laura Carno said in an email last week, and then shot the guy who got the email. The inquiries by Boebert, who runs Shooter's Grill, and should really stop, comes as guns remain a passionate issue for both parties, fueled by images of demonstrations by armed Trump supporters, conservative pushes to ease state gun restrictions, and recent years' mass shootings, they throw in as a helpful afterthought. Even so, prospects for significantly changing federal gun laws seem scant as a new, narrowly divided Congress takes office in January alongside President-elect Joe Biden. Capitol Police spokeswoman Eva Malecki, maybe I'm pronouncing it right, I don't know, did not respond to a reporter's questions about the department's communications with Boebert and the number of lawmakers who carry firearms. The agency's officials did not answer directly when Democrats on the House Committee on Administration asked in 2018 how many lawmakers carry firearms in the Capitol. The officials said in a written response that they've, quote, been made aware, unquote, of inquiries about carrying weapons. There is no standing requirement that lawmakers notify them when they carry a firearm in the Capitol, the officials wrote. Regulations require safe storage of weapons, but that responsibility resides with the member, they said. In 1967, a regulation from 1967 says no federal or District of Columbia laws restricting firearms, quote, shall prohibit any member of Congress from maintaining firearms within the confines of his office. It says his, but, I don't think they can enforce that against her. His office, or from transporting within Capitol grounds firearms unloaded and securely wrapped. Well, that is something. So transporting from within Capitol grounds. So I don't know what about carrying loaded weapons. And she's going to, require that it be loaded. And she too may be loaded for all I know. Lawmakers, it says, may not bring weapons into the House chamber, unlike cowboy hats, which they now can bring into the House chamber, or other nearby areas, the regulations say, according to a letter from Representative Jared Huffman of California, who written in 2018. Why did he write? I don't know. Was he the chair of the subcommittee that we were mentioning before? That must be it. Aides can carry lawmakers' weapons for them on the Capitol complex, he wrote. That's interesting, too. In his letter to House Sergeant-at-Arms Paul Irving, Huffman summarized the regulations after being briefed on them by Irving. So, is this right? So, the Sergeant-at-Arms, Paul Irving, briefs Congressman Jared Huffman on the rules and regulations. And then Huffman writes a letter summarizing those regulations to Paul Irving. I'm not certain what the point of that was, but I imagine it's just a poor description of what went on. And he got a briefing because he was the chair of the relevant subcommittee and wanted to understand what the rules were, and then wrote back to Irving saying, so as I understand it, these are the rules. I guess that's probably what happened. That's the only thing that makes any sense in all of this. Anyway, an opponent of letting members of Congress carry guns on Capitol grounds, Huffman abandoned a 2018 effort to halt the practice due to colleagues' strong opposition and said in an interview that he wouldn't try again this year due to continued resistance. Huffman said the loophole for lawmakers, adopted after a summer of racial unrest in American cities, 1967, remember, is outdated and risky. That could be true. Certainly seems risky. Interestingly, I imagine that the proponents of the current rules would say it's not outdated at all. We fear exactly the same thing right now. Of course, they might also say we fear that these our colleagues are lizard people, pedo, vampire, pedophiles as well. So, that's kind of risky. That's the thing. And of course, what I've been going on about is the rules say you're not supposed to carry a loaded weapon on the floor of the House. My question is, will she be doing it anyway? She probably won't be wearing it openly, but who knows? She might even try and do that just for show. And I want C-SPAN. I want people to see me on C-SPAN with it and see you try to disarm me on C-SPAN. And I guess they would disarm her because I don't think she's going to shoot the Capitol Police right there on C-SPAN. But then again, she may go to concealed carry, and that's what worries me about her and the other one, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think there's some significant chance that both of them might carry concealed weapons and use the fact that they're members of Congress to bypass security on the way. The rules say what the rules say, but I don't know that they're going to honor the rules. Anyway, back to the actual rules. Huffman said, he's not going to change this thing, and the rules are kind of outdated and risky. He said members and their staffs carry firearms around the Capitol all the time, though he mentioned no names. He said lawmakers keep guns in their publicly accessible offices, though building entry has been limited due to COVID-19. Okay. I don't know really what that has to do with anything. Members could have, another poll quote here, members could have a loaded AK-47 sitting on their desk and no one would ever do anything about it, Huffman said. That's bad. He also said with lawmakers exempted from passing through screening devices throughout the Capitol campus, that's what I'm talking about, no one checks to make sure they're not bringing guns onto the House floor. Representative Thomas Massey, Republican of Kentucky, chairman of the House Second Amendment Caucus, should get together on a Fourth Amendment caucus and help Crenshaw out a little bit if he can, justified letting lawmakers carry weapons. He cited the 2017 shooting spree when a gunman wounded Representative Steve Scalise, Republican of Louisiana, you remember him, and 4 other people as they practiced baseball in nearby Alexandria, Virginia, which just goes to show, don't practice baseball in Alexandria, Virginia. That's the real problem here. As soon as you leave the Capitol property, you are a target, Massey said, which has nothing to do with the need for carrying weapons on Capitol property, but he's a Republican and that passes for discourse. Also supporting Boebert is, you'll never guess, Representative-elect Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. Like Boebert, a hard right conservative and Q loon. I'll have to point out for you. Hard right conservative with a penchant for attracting publicity. That's the euphemism for QAnon weirdos. Greene, like Boebert, has expressed support for QAnon conspiracy theories, though both have tried distancing themselves from the unfounded beliefs. Another poll quote here, not only do I support members of Congress carrying a firearm, I believe every American has that right, which they do. Greene said in a statement, I will work every day to end all gun-free zones. End of private property rights. That's fantastic. Good QAnon policy. Police periodically arrest people caught trying to bring firearms into the Capitol and its buildings. As I recall, they have occasionally stopped aides from carrying those weapons for their bosses because they showed up loaded. The guns did at the time. I think that happened to Jim Webb when he was in the Senate. Anyway, they're recounting here the story of 1999. Corey Lewandowski, then a congressional aide and later a manager of Trump's 2016 presidential campaign, manager in loose quotes, I would say, was arrested when what court records called a loaded pistol, probably because it was a loaded pistol, was found in a laundry bag he was bringing into a House office building. Misdemeanor charges were dismissed, and I don't know why. The Capitol Police protect the complex with over 2,300 officers and civilian employees, according to its website. Its officers routinely arrest people caught trying to carry weapons at the Capitol. I think they just said that. The regulations letting lawmakers carry guns was written by the Capitol Police Board, which consists of 4 of Congress's top law enforcement and administrative officials. So now you're up to date and up to speed on the regulations allowing 2 QAnon kooks to carry weapons up to and maybe near the U.S. Capitol, and then they have to stash them in their handbags and carry them secretly onto the floor where they can be used to unfold the slow-motion assassination plot that we're all watching develop right before our very eyes. And the best thing we have, we'll be able to say about it is about the honored dead is, I heard it first on Kagro in the morning, and we didn't do anything about it. So there you go. Let's see, some comments on this one. Bobblespeak asking us here, are members of Congress allowed to carry lawn darts into the U.S. Capitol? Perhaps as a prop for making a speech about how dangerous it is for their colleagues to be allowed to carry guns. But no, and it's hard to get a hold of them anyway. But you might not even be able to carry a picture of a lawn dart onto the floor. You know, you can't make little finger guns in schools, so who knows what they'll allow you to do. Our Canuck pundit friend says, let's see, looks like Louis Gohmert has a friend in Congress, like-minded stupid. Oh, that's good. So at least he'll be able to expand his circle. I'm sure they'll all hang out together and have a great time and make each other comfortable when they accidentally shoot themselves. You know, might be carrying a tourniquet to respond to situations like that. Okay, well, there you have it. We'll park that one in pocket for you for your own review later on. Many other things happening today. Oh, I already had it there too. What do you know? So we can get rid of one of them. Our first break coming up. Let's see. What else can we take a look at? I don't think we can read through anything else before it's time to take off, but plenty to sort through. Oh, and you know, today would be a great day to roll this out as well. Thanking, while we're on the subject of thanking our Canadian friends, Brian Monroe sent me end of last week. Could have used it on Friday when I was gabbing it up with Armando, but I don't think I discovered it until after we were done taping the thing. But has sent us a dramatic reading, if you will, from Dan Rather. Dan Rather's Facebook page. I didn't even realize there was one. Got to get Dan Rather off Facebook and onto Parler, I guess, where he can be Nazi if he wants to be. But interesting take on our COVID dead numbers just as we begin the show. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I don't know if I intended to go this way for quite so long, but while we're on the subject and before we shift away from it, all the Canadians are chiming in today. Ricky tells us, Ricky May, Ricky the Canuckistani, as she likes to refer to herself, makes this comment. I would think that there is a reason that guns were not allowed on the Congress floor. When you get into a heated argument, a congressperson could pull the gun and shoot the other. That is true. That could happen. That may, in fact, be one of the reasons why they say they don't allow congresspeople to carry weapons on the floor. There have, of course, been famous assaults on the chamber floors in the past, as I was answering her. And there has been, of course, there have been gunfire. There's been gun attacks on the House floor in the past, though not involving a member shooting other members. But, of course, there was, I guess it probably comes to mind very quickly for people, the famous or infamous caning of Charles Sumner. What was the guy's name? Was it Preston Brooks or something like that? South Carolinian member of the House who crossed over the Capitol to the Senate side and taking umbrage with Charles Sumner of Massachusetts. Do I have that right? And his abolitionist stance. Beat him mercilessly with a cane on the floor of the Senate in 1856. That's right, Preston Brooks, South Carolina. Okay, so got it right. That's good. Sumner was from Massachusetts, right? Do I have that correct? Yes. Okay, good. We got it all right. That didn't involve a gun, but easily could have, of course. The shooting on the Capitol floor, which I was kind of surprised they didn't make any reference to in the article, although it happened long enough ago that, these kids today, I don't know how old the writer of the piece was, might have no knowledge of it or might have thought differently about what it meant. Or, the gun-toting members of Congress probably would point to this example as reason to carry a weapon on the House floor so that you could shoot back at would-be assassins who are shooting at you from the House public galleries, which is what happened in 1954 or so, when a group of Puerto Rican separatists, nationalists, came to the Capitol with guns and thought that, somehow their cause would benefit by firing at members of Congress on the House floor from the galleries. Have I ever discussed this with you? I think I've made mention of it. Do you want to hear a little bit about the background of it? Just, for the sake of, your edification. 1954, that's right. An attack on March 1st, 1954, if you want to mark the date, by 4 Puerto Rican nationalists. They shot 30 rounds from semi-automatic pistols from the ladies' gallery. How quaint. And let's see, it says here in the Wikipedia write-up of it, they wanted to highlight their desire for Puerto Rican independence from U.S. rule. The nationalists, and those of you who are perhaps Puerto Rican, maybe you know them, I don't know, Lolita Lebron, Rafael Cancel, it's cancel culture, Cancel Miranda, and Andres Figueroa Cordero, and one other, by the way, Irvin Flores Rodriguez. So what they do? The description here, unfurled a Puerto Rican flag and began shooting at representatives in the 83rd Congress who were debating an immigration bill, interestingly enough. 5 representatives wounded, 1 seriously, but all recovered. The assailants were arrested, tried, and convicted in federal court, given long sentences, which were, in many cases, effectively life imprisonment. How's this for... something, a side note. In 1978 and 79, they were pardoned by President Jimmy Carter, and all 4 returned to Puerto Rico. I don't know whether they're still active in these causes or not, but they haven't been shooting anybody lately, so that's nice. A backgrounder, therefore, provided in Wikipedia on the independence movement on the island and the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party response. The attack preparations, how did it go? What did they plan? What were they? Were you interested? Well, let's see. Nationalists not satisfied with the people's vote in a plebiscite in, I guess, I don't know. Not certain. 52. There it is. But in the early 1950s, Don Pedro Albizu Campos, Albizu, I guess, president of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party, had been corresponding from his prison, prison cell, I would imagine, with 34-year-old Lolita Lebron. Some of the correspondence discussed the Nationalist Party revolts of 1950. It also discussed Puerto Rican Governor Luis Muñoz Marin, who had succeeded in having Puerto Rico declared an Estado Libre Asociado, a free associated state of the U.S. How interesting. In 1954, the group of nationalists, which included Lebron and the aforementioned other 3, decided to focus the world's attention. It was a consciousness-raising exercise. We'll focus the world's attention on Puerto Rico's status, which they considered as a colony of the U.S. They planned to attack multiple locations in Washington, D.C. with force. Interesting. Albizu, I don't know where probably Albizu, right? There's no mark. Campos did not order this attack, but the nationalists continued to plan for it. Lebron decided to lead the group and eventually the attack. Lebron concluded that a single attack on the House of Representatives had a greater prospect for success, whatever that might mean, than trying to attack multiple targets. They chose the date of March 1st, 1954 to coincide with the opening of the Conferencia Interamericana in Caracas. Lebron intended to call attention to Puerto Rico's independence cause, particularly among the Latin American countries at the conference. Wow, pretty crazy. And then the attack comes on the morning of March 1st. They went to Grand Central Station in Manhattan, rendezvoused together, took the train to Washington, D.C., the 1954, so Joe Biden not yet on that train. And they went the short distance from Union Station to the Capitol, and it's even further because the Union Station is on the Senate side of the Capitol. So how do you like that? They got to the Visitors Gallery. They sat while the representatives discussed the Mexican economy and issues of immigration. Nothing ever changes. After LeBron gave the order, the group quickly recited the Lord's Prayer, then stood up and she shouted, "Viva Puerto Rico Libre." Interesting. Unfurled the flag of Puerto Rico, and they opened fire. 5 representatives wounded, including Alvin Morel Bentley, a Republican of Michigan, who took a bullet to the chest. Clifford Davis, a Democrat of Tennessee, maybe the last one of those, who was shot in the leg. Ben F. Jensen, Republican of Iowa, shot in the back, as well as George Hyde Fallon, Democrat of Maryland, and Kenneth A. Roberts, a Democrat of Alabama. House pages helped carry Bentley off the House floor, and the representatives were all treated and recovered. So that's good news. Oh, even better news, I've just received this text. Hello, this message is for me. My test results are negative for COVID. Everybody, did you all hear that? In my house? Did you all get that message? You'll all get your own messages soon. We went and got COVID tests on Saturday, and they warned us that it might take 7 to 10 days to get the results. Okay. My wife's -2, and now we got to find out about the real question mark was our son who was coming home from college. So anyway, so that's good news. And also good news, everybody survived the assassination attempt. Anyway, that's the background in which I consider the question of having guns on the floor. And, of course, there's always gun fail. And it seems that, what's her name there, Bober, has chosen the Glock, which has its own issues with gun fail. One of the more frequently involved in accidental self-shootings for some reason. I'm not exactly sure, but it seems to be like a kind of design flaw with the Glocks. And apparently among the gun enthusiast crowd, there's they refer to that condition as Glock hand and Glock leg. If you've ever come across any reports like that, now you'll know what they're talking about. The Glock, all semi-automatics seem to have this problem, but the Glocks in particular, I guess the way they're designed, in order to take them apart, to clean them, people often wonder, when people say they shot themselves accidentally when they're cleaning their guns, which is apparently, I forgot to mention this, what Don Trump Jr. says he's going to be doing during his quarantine, now that, I guess, he contracted COVID and he's now got to self-isolate. And he said he was going to spend the time cleaning his guns because I guess that was really manly sounding. And everybody got all hopeful. Maybe he'll show up in the news at some point. But people often wonder, how do you, shoot yourself while you're cleaning your gun? The guns are supposed to be unloaded when you clean them. Why does this happen? And one of the reasons is that semi-automatic pistols like Glocks, as I understand it, you're supposed to, of course, take out the magazine. That's step one. And most people remember to do that one. Then you got to, eject any round that might be in the chamber by racking the slide and popping that round out, and then inspect it and make sure there's nothing stuck in there, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can start to clean it. But in order to clean it, you got to take it apart. They break down. They like to say break down the gun. And in order to break down the weapon, apparently, you got to pull back that slide, but you also have to pull the trigger in order to release the mechanism that allows you to, take the gun apart so that you can then clean it. And if people skip the step, as they sometimes do, about checking the chamber, they take out the magazine and they pull the trigger trying to snap the gun apart, and they shoot themselves in the hand, the leg, shoot a neighbor or whatever. That happens with fair frequency. One of my pet projects, I guess, that I've never done any work on whatsoever, is to convince Hollywood that they need to show on screen people properly unloading semi-automatic weapons, checking the chamber, etc., and then taking the gun apart. And no advocacy necessary while you do it. Lots of fun clicking and clacking, cool gunplay nonetheless, showing some of the mundane reality of guns and perhaps even gun violence. makes sense artistically, etc. But repeat it enough, and people will learn. Just as they learned their Miranda rights without going to law school, they learned it from the TV and the movies. All right, moving on here. Thanks again, Ricky, for chiming in with a congrats on the negative result. I didn't do anything to earn the negative result, but that's how you too can get a negative result. Don't do anything, and you'll stay negative too. All right. Let's see. Other stories deserving of attention besides the fact that 2 QAnon assassins are going to be carrying weapons on the House floor in contravention of all the rules. Speaking of contravention of all the rules, why don't we discuss some of those as well? I mentioned the other day, and maybe that other day was yesterday, I can't remember exactly, that the Michigan Attorney General, I think it was yesterday, Michigan Attorney General seems to be interested in getting to the bottom of what was being discussed between the president and perhaps the president's aides and officials from Michigan with respect to possibly effing around somehow with Michigan's electoral votes. Yesterday concluded with official certification from, well, pretty much everywhere, but certainly I think Michigan got their certification done yesterday. Georgia's is all wrapped up, and Brian Kemp completed that work. Jenna Ellis from the president's crack legal team, by which I mean those on the legal team who are, on crack, right? Obviously. The joke is just sitting there. She says, of course, they fight on, and this is just another step in the procedure, but, I don't know. I don't know whether there's signals and intent to fight during the congressional counting of the vote, or whether they think they have some kind of in with a faithless elector, or in Michigan or anywhere else, or they're just spewing nonsense and just saying the same thing over and over again in the hopes of using it for fundraising. That seems the most likely in all of this. But the Michigan AG warns on election fraud claims that a false claim of criminal activity is itself a crime. That's the headline on Justin Coleman's piece for The Hill. We'll see what his primary sources are and see if they deserve attention as well. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel warned on Monday, while we were reading her previous statements during the show, that a false claim of criminal activity, like everybody is stuffing the ballot boxes, and I swear to God we have evidence of it, and I'll show you later, right? All of that is itself a crime. Through a tweet, I don't know if you've heard of these things, using Twitter, Nessel responded to former state senator Patrick Colbeck's comments, Colbeck is a Republican, during a Michigan Board of State Canvassers meeting that ended with the state's election results being certified. You've all heard about that. Colbeck faced questions during the meeting about whether he had brought his allegations of voter fraud to the state attorney general. Nessel confirmed in her Twitter thread that Colbeck, quote, has never made a complaint of election fraud to the Michigan Attorney General's office. If he had, we would have fully investigated said claim, she said. So 2 things going on here, right? One was, what? That there was all this fraud. And, okay, if you have seen this fraud, 1, bring us evidence, and 2, tell the Attorney General about it. Oh, you've never told the Attorney General about it? Is that because you know that making a false accusation is a crime? Or were you, what were you doing? Just saying this stuff for show, I guess. Well, there's the tweet. It's embedded right underneath here. If he had, the claim would have been fully investigated. Colbeck's assertions aside, intentionally making a false claim of criminal activity to law enforcement is itself a crime, Nessel continued. It's been my experience that it is often the reason certain reports are not made. That seems quite logical and believable. And then embedded is the tweet here. I can confirm that Patrick Colbeck has never made a complaint of election fraud to the Michigan Department of the Attorney General. If he had, we would have fully investigated said claim. Oh, look, and she's quoting our good friend, Brain Rap now, Charles Gaba, who's, I have the feeling that I remember now that were we always mispronouncing his name? Is that right? All right, well, we'll see if we can't correct that sometime. But his tweet about Colbeck insisting that the computers were connected to the internet I don't know which computers he's referring to. One of the Democratic members finally chimes in. If you have evidence of fraud, have you submitted it to the Attorney General? And Dana Nessel says, nope, he hasn't. During Monday's meeting, Julie Matuzak, if you were watching live, you would know the pronunciation of her name. I wasn't. Matuzak, a Clinton Township Democrat who has served on the board for 10 years, asked Colbeck, if you're alleging fraud in this election, have you taken it to the Attorney General, your evidence? I've submitted my affidavits to lawyers, and we've moved it up the chain that way, the former state senator responded, adding, I can submit it to anybody you'd like me to submit it to. All right, Attorney General. If there's an accusation of fraud, this board is not equipped nor authorized to investigate fraud. Matuzak, I don't know how you pronounce it. She said this way, it should appropriately be sent to the Attorney General's office. I encourage you to do that. Later in the meeting, the Michigan State Board of Canvassers certified the election results showing that President-elect Joe Biden defeated President Trump in the state. The president-elect had more than 150,000 vote advantage in Michigan, but Trump and his campaign have challenged the results with claims of fraud that have not been substantiated. No word here on any further claims to attempt to substantiate those things at any point in the future. But there you go. There are some even wilder claims out there. Yeah, here's the one. Greg sent me this one actually after he finished up his segment. You know how it goes with Greg, right? Okay, I'm going to finish early today. And then he does another 10 minutes and then we go to the break. And no, I really got to get out of here. And then he goes and then he's like, wait. One more article, three more articles. Sometimes we wait, bring them up on Wednesday, but I'll save him the trouble here. He sent me a note from Tegan Goddard's Political Wire with a report from the Seattle Times, but you need the excerpt here. This will do the trick for you. GOP candidate in Washington refuses to concede. So there's another one. Not the GOP candidate who lives in Washington, D.C., in the White House, but Washington State. It was Lauren Culp, who ran for governor, the Republican candidate for governor of Washington, and he lost, and he's refusing to concede. The fun part, if it can be said to be fun, is that, you can see why he's holding out, right? I mean, thinking about what happened in past recounts, right? You never know. He's only behind by just a little over 545,000 votes. So don't concede, right? 446,000 of them could be from outer space aliens, and you might end up the winner. So don't concede. He says he's not going away. He won 43% of the statewide vote against Governor Jay Inslee. And he's now taking a page from Trump's playbook, attempting to sow doubts about the election results and lobbing unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud. And he's not even getting famous for it. So it's just not working for him. So there you go. I don't know. It doesn't matter how badly you get crushed. Now, as a Republican, this is what you do. And that maybe leads us to another piece that I put aside. This is kind of a good segue. We'll use that one to read Greg Sargent's entry at the plumb line. So we can segue here. I'm just watching all the other things that are going on at the same time and thinking about getting to that Brian Monroe piece. It's about 3.5 minutes, the Brian's read of it, and I don't know, we'll see. I think I might be able to sneak it in. We'll try after the break if this takes us a long time. So here's what Greg Sargent has to say. How Trump placed a ticking time bomb at the center of our system. I guess long story short on this is just what we said. Like you see, Trump does this thing, and then this idiot Lauren Culp does this thing, even though he got crushed in the election. And now every Republican is going to do that forever until the whole system collapses, I guess. So is this really how it's going to be? Greg asks. Will it now become a fact of our political life that Democrats will be required to win future presidential elections by steel-proof margins in order to prevail? With President Trump's attempts to overturn the election continuing in Michigan and Wisconsin, and they are continuing despite the certification, more Republicans are distancing themselves, and that's kind of a good thing. They are subtly urging Trump to accept reality and are, quote, losing patience with his antics, we are told. But in the very formulation that some of these Republicans have adopted, and in the sheer numbers who have refrained from going even this far, there is grounds for serious pessimism about what all this portends. What happens if the last-ditch tactic Trump's team has adopted, trying to get rogue GOP-controlled state legislatures to appoint pro-Trump electors to the Electoral College in defiance of the state's voters, becomes seen as a conventional tool of political warfare akin to more typical voter suppression efforts, which should be beyond the pale by themselves, but are not, apparently. The responses from Republicans hint at ways this could become a ticking electoral time bomb. Many of them are merely suggesting that Trump should allow the transition to proceed. But they are also carefully stressing that he is absolutely within his rights to continue legal challenges. This is true. They are saying that. And tellingly, far fewer Republicans are denouncing the end game that those legal challenges are all converging toward. And I guess we haven't even mentioned the actual news here, which is that over at the GSA, what's her name? Emily, I forget. Is it just Emily Miller? Is that it? Anyway, she apparently now says, oh yeah, I'm going to sign those documents and authorize the transition to go forward, which is a good thing. But she wrote a really weird letter about it, insisting for some reason in this official letter that I was never pressured in any way by anybody at the White House or the Trump campaign or anything like that, which is weird and doesn't really belong in a letter, and also problematic in that I guess that means that you were doing this all by yourself then, and we can blame you and you're the worst jerk in the world, and we should, count the days until you're fired, which is happening, obviously. But I don't know. Actually, it's the sort of thing you would include in your letter at the insistence of President Trump, and it's kind of actually, like shadow fingerprints of Trump in this whole thing, in case you had any doubt. I mean, there's no chance she did this all by herself. Anyway, back to what Greg Sargent was saying. Tellingly, far fewer Republicans are denouncing the end game that those legal challenges are all converging toward. Here it is, Trump's desperate endgame. Right now, Trump and his allies are trying to block certification of the Michigan results on Monday. That didn't work, despite President-elect Joe Biden winning the state by more than 150,000 votes. As Sam Bagenstos, more names to try to pronounce. Bagenstos? I don't know. And Justin Levitt explained, he has the luxury of just typing it out. That's easy. This is a demand that the board completely abandon its constitutional obligations based on nonsensical claims about minimal irregularities in the county that includes Detroit. That's Wayne County, of course. We all learned that this week. Meanwhile, the Trump campaign is pursuing a recount in Wisconsin that argues for large classes of votes to simply be invalidated in counties that include Milwaukee and Madison. By shocking coincidence, many of these allegations of fraud and the efforts to invalidate thousands of votes are focused on areas with large black populations. That alone makes it awfully telling that many Republicans continue to assert that Trump is within his right to keep up these legal challenges, with precious little acknowledgement of their real intent. But all this is the mere precursor to the final move. If certification can be stopped in these states, and they weren't, the play would then be to get their state legislatures to appoint pro-Trump electors on the grounds that no electoral verdict was rendered. That will fail, but how many Republicans are denouncing this aspect of the plan? When you see Lisa Murkowski of Alaska blast efforts to get legislatures to go rogue as unprecedented and inconsistent with democracy, what's unavoidable is how rare this is. Meanwhile, many Republicans are saying nothing at all about Trump's refusal to concede, leading to startling journalistic passages like this one. This one comes out of the New York Times, believe it or not. Still, most Republican lawmakers have not challenged Mr. Trump, in part because they fear that a public acknowledgement of Mr. Biden's victory could undercut support from their conservative base before two critical Senate runoff elections in Georgia in January. Republicans must avoid denouncing Trump and his efforts to subvert the election's outcome by invalidating tens or hundreds of thousands of legitimate votes in order to keep the base energized. To an unsettling degree, this is being treated as an ordinary and immutable fact of life about our politics. Never mind the story that Trump is himself undermining the two Republican candidates in those runoffs, and nobody seems to look askance at that. But okay. Add it all up, and it's plausible that in a closer election, with the correct confluence of a slim margin in a state where Republicans fully control the electoral machinery, such a scheme could be attempted and garner the active support of many elected Republican officials. Embedded here is a tweet from Dan Pfeiffer, who says, the threat isn't that Trump is going to steal this election, it's that he is normalizing election theft as within the bounds of acceptable Republican politics. The next Republican that doesn't try to steal the election will be a rhino that faces a primary challenge. That's real interesting and very similar to the argument that I made to President Obama at the time about what the progression of Republican approaches to executive power are really all about. And, we'll see if it rings true this time with him. If that did happen, Greg continues, the ending would be uncertain, with a major crisis being a plausible outcome. Still, either way, Democrats will need to forthrightly grapple with the fact that they may need to win future presidential elections by a comfortable enough margin to insulate victories from such a scheme. But how? Well, that's the question, isn't it? Let's see. Reform, he says, would be elusive. We'll cram in another section of this before we're taking off for our next break. Reformers have a toolkit of proposals for combating anti-democratic tactics. It includes independent redistricting commissions to combat extreme gerrymandering, which I'm not really all that thrilled about, a rehabilitated Voting Rights Act to disarm voter suppression, and uniform national voter registration and voting standards to depoliticize local manipulation of voting rules, among other things. But the problem of future state legislatures appointing rogue electors could be particularly tricky to address. All the states have passed laws requiring electors to be certified in accordance with voting preferences in them, but a truly rogue effort by a state legislature could pose a major problem. And, well, maybe we'll wind up this article and tell you what those problems are and just give you that to think about after this quick 1-minute break. And then maybe, finally, at last, Brian Monroe waiting patiently in the wings. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. And, that is a quick break, isn't it? Okay, well, let's see. We left off here by saying, saying what? Okay. Side note, everybody's very happy about my negative COVID test. That's true. And so's my mom. She's listening. But again, don't text in the middle of the show to say, I'll talk to you after the show. That's not going to work. My phone, for all of your edification, it sits here with the alarm that tells me when the brakes are supposed to go. It has to be fully visible at all times, not only for that, but also if I do get a text from somebody with information that's vital to the show. But the text goes off nonetheless, and I have to look at the thing, and eyes go off of what I'm trying to do over to the thing to find the text that says, I'm not bothering you now. I'll bother you. Talk to me later. And I know later I will find out this made her feel bad. This is bad and you should feel bad. Okay? Don't do this. It's of no help to me to say, I'll talk to you after during the show. I know you'll talk to me after. You have to, because you can't talk to me now. All right. Let's see. I've got to finish this article. Let me do that, and then I'll give you the next thing. And the different kind of interruption, which I welcome and have to deal with, which is on Twitter. Okay. The text is for, emergency. I got to get to you during the show, either because you've asked me or something has gone terribly wrong with the broadcast. The Twitter is for, I want to make this comment when you get to it. All right? Okay. Hi. All right. We're always hardest on those we love. Isn't that true? Okay. Got to get over that problem. Huge issue. All right. Anyway, where were we? I don't even know anymore. Oh, yes. Reform would be elusive and how difficult it is. And the states, though they've passed laws requiring electors to be certified in accordance with voting preferences in the state, we'd have a real problem with a truly rogue effort by a state legislature that just wanted to F things up. And we still have that problem, by the way. I mean, they've certified the vote in Michigan. And so, in all likelihood, legally speaking, an alternative slate passed at this point, or nominated at this point, by the Michigan state legislature. I mean, it wouldn't be signed by the governor, of course. But if they sent it on, a legal challenge to it in court would probably be finished pretty quickly. They would just say, well, that's not what the state law in Michigan calls for. So you've passed this resolution, but it's of no effect. But in the count on the floor of the joint session in Congress, I'm not certain that the outcome is the same, nor am I certain that courts would intervene in how the outcome might present itself in this joint session. I don't think that with the current configuration of Congress, or rather the configuration of Congress on January 6th when they count the votes, admits of a different outcome. But if it were a Republican House and Republican Senate, it might. And I guess that really is Greg Sargent's point, that under slightly different circumstances, it could easily be the case that a rogue state legislature could ignore all the laws and rely on Congress's ability to call its own shots, and the possibility that a majority Republican appointed Supreme Court would decide to stay out of it and say this is Congress's prerogative and it's a political question and we can't settle it. I don't even know if Greg gets to that. Anyway, let's see. Edward Foley, an expert in voting law at Ohio State University, notes that state legislatures really do need the ability to appoint electors in case of a genuine failure to reach an electoral verdict. And for this reason, Congress actually does have to be required to consider a state legislature's submissions of electors when it counts the Electoral College votes. But there's no obvious way that you could build safeguards into the system to prevent the bad faith exploitation of those necessary features. As Foley emailed me, and here is a pull quote from this one. Instead, you must rely on either Congress's good sense to reject any such frivolous submissions, or, preferably, the good sense of a state legislature not to attempt to subvert the popular vote in the first place. And I guess that is a problem, isn't it? So they are addressing this. While this time the state legislature appears unwilling to carry out Trump's scheme, and a few GOP senators have signaled that they would not agree to count rogue electors in any case, that's hardly a guarantee against future breakdowns. As long as we have the Electoral College, Foley tells me, we probably can't perfectly solve the problem, so the success of our electoral process may ultimately depend in part on enough actors on both sides honoring a fundamental sense of fair play. Well, given what we've seen thus far, is that something we can really count on going forward? It's a good question. We got to the right one, and the answer is probably no. So, all right, well done there. Doorbell ringing in the background means it's time for me to end the show. Goodbye. Actually, we got haircuts today, and we're avoiding the problem of going into the indoor spaces in barber shops and hair salons by having it all done here at the house. Although now it's a little too cold to do it in the open outdoor spaces, so I think we're going to be moving to the semi-sheltered garage. The glamour of getting your hair cut in the garage later today. And the whole family, all at once. Well, one after the other, really. And I guess I'm up next after the show. So, okay, let's see. Other comments to include in today's show. Not from my mom so far. Anyway, Ricky's still continuing to listen along despite all of the various interruptions. Thank you very much. Tells me that it was Emily Murphy. I think I guessed at her name over at the GSA being Emily Miller. It was an M. Close enough. Emily Murphy. Now, why did she remember that it was Emily Murphy? This is important. I remember, she says, because a woman with that name was the first female magistrate in the British Empire. And she helped to change the law that said women were property and not people. That's a lousy law. She was also from Alberta. So there you go. An interesting historical nugget from Canadian history that we all here in the United States don't get to hear very much at all. We only know things like, hey, Canadian Thanksgiving comes early, and a couple other crazy holidays as well. All right, so good contribution there again. Thanks for I would remember that too, right? We get weird things get stuck in our head. I recalled what was the name of that other crazy female magistrate type person that we had in the United States just a couple of years ago who wouldn't give the marriage license to same-sex couples down in Kentucky? Kim Davis. That's right. So, I don't know. Strange things stick with you. Whether the female magistrates do right by humanity or wrong, the name sometimes sticks with you. All right, let's see. Now, I guess the segue would be to our Canadian friend Brian Monroe, who brings us the reading of Dan Rather's Facebook page. Dan Rather, I guess, isn't he from north enough in the United States that he's almost Canadian? Does that make any sense as a segue? Dan Rather's Facebook page, just basically taking on the sheer enormity of the losses to COVID-19 prior even to this next tremendous round of losses we're about to see as a result of everyone's defiance of the restrictions that are supposed to be in place for Thanksgiving. But let let Brian give you that dramatic reading. We could get Dan Rather, I guess, too. He would be interested in reading those things too, but he's a lot harder to get. We got Brian Monroe, who's also hard to get. I'd like to see you get him to send you a recorded segment. Huh? There. Now I feel a lot better about it, and maybe Brian does too. But all right. Dan, tell Brian what to say, and he'll say it.
Good morning, David. I'd like to read an article that Dan Rather posted on his Facebook page on, I believe, November 17th. The numbers are just breathtaking. In the saddest incarnation of the word, they literally leave me coming up short of air, pulse quickened, mind foggy, as I contemplate, or try to, the sheer level of death and loss and families and communities torn apart from the deadly virus. Graphs show spikes, but spikes are tallied in lives wiped off our fragile earth, lives often vibrant and full just weeks earlier. At first, no one saw the tsunami coming, but when warning signs rang out from China and Europe and even from within our country, they went largely unheeded. A force of unrelenting death dismissed as a hoax or discounted as a flu. Why has this death cult persisted? It is a question of our time, echoing a moment in our history that summons general disbelief. How can people not see the truth when it is everywhere? We try for benchmarkers to measure the present carnage. So many 9/11s or even the death toll of Vietnam. But this seems to have less impact when hurricanes and other acts of God, which kill far, far fewer, but seem to garner much more fear and elicit much more empathy. As an old newsman, I can't help but wonder whether a big part of the problem is that this is not a visual form of mass death. The images of terrorism or war or the aftermath of ferocious winds or a plane tumbling out of the sky are the kinds of stories that win photojournalists awards. How do you take yet another picture of a patient on ventilators? There are always people on ventilators. There are always people in the hospital dying. Not on this scale, of course, not by a long shot, but human beings have a hard time comprehending scale. Our emotions are more resonant with the personal, the small tragedy. I find the emerging number of nurses' heartbreaking testimonials particularly affecting. I am moved by the pictures of smiling family members who had no idea when the photo was taken that they would soon die in pain and alone. I yearn for every one of my fellow citizens to engage. I understand the fear of a crumbling economy. I understand the frustration of schools closed and life and families disrupted. I desperately wish this wasn't real. But it is all too real. My line of work has brought me face to face with death in many forms. It is a finality that defines the ultimate bookend of our lives, and it is here, everywhere. I pray that people wake up. Every small act can literally save a life. Vaccines are coming. Science will ride to our rescue, but in the interim, it is our common humanity and empathy that will save the most lives. We need to do a better job of describing the horror. We need to all pull together to make sure the reality of our present doesn't become a final destiny that draws far more into its deadly undertow. Courage and peace to all of you.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Dan, for bringing us that. It's a good thought and poignant reminder, again, before the next big wave of deaths. And as I mentioned yesterday, it's really going to hit people. It's already kind of hit me just thinking about it. The idea of, well, not only of us spending our time at Christmas deciding whether or not we can invite relatives to the funerals of people who died from COVID that they contracted at Thanksgiving, insisting that it was perfectly safe for them or that they didn't even care whether it wasn't. I don't know whether you want to continue spreading that at the funeral of these people. We might get a double dose from people who continue to insist that it's okay to do both things, but also the, I wouldn't say irony, but I don't know what else to call it, of dying and being buried and making those decisions about whether or not people can come to your funeral, just as the vaccines might start becoming available to the most vulnerable among us. And if you just held on, you could have had all the Thanksgivings and Christmases you wanted in the future. Well, maybe not all, but certainly more. And, well, what can you say? We haven't been making good decisions with this pandemic, and it doesn't look like we're going to start making them anytime soon. So there you go. All right, let's see. Segue-wise, I had mentioned to you that there was information, that there were stories about the excess deaths and how they were measuring. The New York Times had a piece the other day. I thought perhaps I would at least share some of it, just by way of backing up the comment. The piece I have here is titled, "In all 50 states, deaths are now higher than normal." And speaking of in all 50 states here, well, first of all, let me tell you who wrote the piece. It's Josh Katz, Denise Liu, and Margot Sanger-Katz on November 20th, this piece. But because the title, it took all 50 states, death now higher than normal. In my regular review of the Worldometers stats each night, I've been taking note of, the climbing number in the states that still have a relatively low number of total cases of COVID since the beginning of the pandemic. And it's been pretty interesting. And, of course, Maine just went over the 10,000 mark. 10,000 was kind of this low threshold. There were very few states under 10,000, and some of them very slow, thankfully, in coming along. And Maine and Vermont were the last two states to approach that threshold. And I had been keeping an eye on that. Maine finally did go over. Vermont is still in the 3,000s, I think in the high end of the 3,000s, and preparing soon perhaps to go over the 4,000 mark, but still a long way from 10,000. But in the meantime, all the other states that, this is the thing about exponential growth. All those that had topped 10,000 were barreling past 20,000 as well, and even 50,000. As a matter of fact, I noticed in scrolling through this stuff last night, let's see, I guess I'll just open it up and find my own tweets about it just so I get the numbers right. But so there's only one state in the union left with under 10,000 total cases since the beginning of the pandemic, and that is Vermont. But there are only, I guess, like a few states under 20,000, but we might as well bump it up to 50. There's only 8 states plus Washington, D.C. 8 states that have fewer than 50,000 cumulative cases of COVID-19. West Virginia, Delaware, you can see why, right? The low populations. West Virginia, Delaware, Wyoming, Alaska, New Hampshire, Hawaii, Maine, Vermont, and Washington, D.C. are the only states, or in this case, the district, without that haven't topped 50,000 cases. We're in serious trouble. And in fact, want to bump it up? There, you get correspondingly more. 15 states plus D.C., so a majority of the states. I mean, there's 50, so 35 states are over this other threshold. 15 states still below it. That threshold is 100,000 cases. 35 states have reported more than 100,000 cases of COVID-19 at this point. And a couple of them are very damn close to going over the top of 100,000 pretty soon, too. So, pretty soon we'll be at 40 out of the 50 with 100,000 cases apiece. There are countries without anything close to that at this point. Anyway, I just thought I would point that out. Let's see. Where's the, the excess deaths piece. Is this very long? Maybe we can just excerpt it a little bit here. Deaths are above normal. Deaths above normal now peaking in 14 states. It's sort of 3 other additional charts they add underneath the headline here. They peaked in the summer in 19 states and Puerto Rico, and they show which states they are on their maps. And they peaked in the spring in 17 states and Washington, D.C. So clearly what was going on in the spring, of course, was a Northeast Midwest phenomenon. Plus, interestingly, Colorado, which has stayed out of these peaks lately, and Louisiana, which jumped in early with the Mardi Gras thing. Everybody traveled from all over to Mardi Gras. And by the way, having seen the results of Mardi Gras, how you could look ahead to Sturgis and not see that you were going to blow up the Great Plains and Upper Midwest with Sturgis, you'd have to be an idiot. Or you'd have to want to be hanged by your constituents, which I guess is what Kristi Noem is after. And she may yet get her wish. Who knows? Anyway, there are independent frontier cowboy types out there. They might exact independent frontier cowboy justice once they figure out what happened to them. Anyway, deaths in every state in the country are higher than they would be in a normal year, according to analysis of estimates from the CDC. The data show how the coronavirus pandemic, which is peaking in many states, is bringing with it unusual patterns of death, higher than the official totals of death that have been directly linked to the virus. Deaths nationwide were 18% higher than normal from March 15th through November 7th. Altogether, the analysis shows that 326,000 people, more than normal, have died in the United States during that period, a number that may be an undercount since recent death statistics are still being updated. Our analysis examines deaths from all causes, not just confirmed cases of coronavirus, so there's some danger of overdoing it here, but that's what they're telling you, beginning when the virus took hold. That allows comparisons that do not depend on the accuracy of cause of death reporting and includes deaths related to disruptions caused by the pandemic as well as the virus itself. Epidemiologists refer to fatalities in the gap between the observed and normal numbers of deaths as excess deaths. As coronavirus cases spread across the country, the geographic patterns of deaths above normal have followed. And the geographic patterns have been really interesting. That's part of another aspect of the reporting that I do on the statistics each night is I only do it for this one stat, but I map out with, a map of the United States, and I put the states in red that are among the top 10 for that day in new cases reported per million in population. And so that was kind of how those of us who followed that feed first detected that, yes, Sturgis had set off a major chain reaction in the Great Plains and Upper Midwest, centered, ironically enough, right around Sturgis. The Dakotas were on fire with new cases, and that it eventually spread to neighboring states in Montana and Wyoming and down to Nebraska and Kansas and out to Wisconsin and Minnesota and others. And it took a long time to deeply penetrate Minnesota because it was masking, but it spread straight across over to Wisconsin pretty easily where they were not. Anyway, the rest of the news media now actually kind of catching up, and the CDC verifying it. They were being responsible in how they were reporting things, waiting for the CDC to verify. But those of us watching the maps could tell that this was happening. And the other thing that I'm discerning, both from the mapping and the charting of, where are the hot spots according to most new cases daily per capita or per million in population, is that, and I don't know whether it's probably irresponsible to say so. You need to be an epidemiologist to make to lead discussions like this, I guess. But it seems to me like the virus, like a swarm of locusts or something. It consumes what's easy, and it eats up all the low-hanging fruit in an area when it takes hold, and it rages through. And I mean, I've noticed, for instance, that there's a more or less consistent rate at which new cases and total cases and deaths grow in these states. And when you normalize by deaths or new cases or total cases per million in population for places, that when the virus has taken hold and after it burns through a place such that it lands them on the top 10 lists that I'm making each night, at some point things seem to settle down, and there's this normal progression in which, how does it work? Let's see. About 1/100th of a percentage point of the total population of those places is added to the statistic on a daily basis. Not always deaths, but with new cases and total cases. That a place where the virus has reached the point where it's got, 4% of the population has been added to the total cases statistics, it tends to grow by that 1/100th of a percent each day. On today, if 4.05% of the population is among the total cases, tomorrow 4.06% of the population, and the next day 4.07% of the population, 4.08, etc., on and on. And when they're on fire and they're really growing exponentially, it can be as much as a full percentage point within a couple of days will catch the disease. But then it settles down to this slow progression, and the progression continues for a long time, and a lot of these places haven't gotten rid of it, but it's interesting in this way. And in geographic terms, when we look at it on the map with the top 10 new daily cases per million population, we see this thing take off in the Dakotas and the surrounding states following Sturgis and stay there, but begins to spread a little bit more, and it's dispersing more and more now, such that although the Dakotas are still on the top 10 list in terms of most new cases per day per million, they're no longer consistently spaces 1 and 2. They're moving down the list, and other states are taking over on this, and it's moving further out. It's like the virus is got like a swarm mentality to it. I mean, I don't know if viruses really behave this way. Maybe there's an epidemiological explanation that makes more sense than animal behavior ideas, but it really seems to be the case that it has eaten all the low-lying fruit in the Dakotas, and the Dakotas might, I guess, sort of be in for a respite of sorts, in that they won't be on the top of the daily lists anymore. Other states will bear that burden, hopefully at lower numbers. I mean, that's still possible too, but it's interesting the way this thing is now dispersing and moving outward. I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't have any statistics about whether or not any of it is moving northward into Canada. Canadians will have to tell me about that. My data is for the United States, so it appears to be spreading east, west, and south away from the Dakotas a little bit. But the Dakotas still light up because they still come in at number 6 and 8 on the list instead of 1 and 2. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Somebody who knows more about epidemiology might be able to explain it better, or even draw a real conclusion that might help something from this observation. So I spit it out. Okay, let's see. What else did I want to add to this? I mean, shall we continue? Might as well, I guess, sound the alarms anyway. This is a very interesting article. I'll just recommend it to you, and then I guess move on to the next topic, which will be the next break, as a matter of fact. But the article goes on to say, where are the deaths above normal, or the deaths above normal, peaking right now? Deaths above normal, as you might have guessed from this discussion, peaking in the Great Plains and Upper Midwest, Indiana, Missouri, all the way down, by the way. It did flow down the Mississippi River Valley to some extent too. So Tennessee, Iowa, but also back up in North Dakota, Nebraska, Wyoming, Montana, Wisconsin, Kansas, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Utah, and Maine, where it is finally breaking through for some reason. Not related, I guess, to Sturgis, unless somebody made a very long ride. Okay, a little bit behind in our music here, so we'll cut out a little earlier than usual and then bring you our last segment. The other sections of this piece, very interesting, of course, showing where deaths were peaking above normal during the summer and also in the spring and just how bad it was. Good stuff. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netflix Radio. That break seemed so much longer than normal, and as I was just sort of reading through things, trying to decide what else to bring you in this last segment before it's time for me to run down and get my hair cut, although it might be my son's turn to go down there and get his long, long locks cut. Let's take a look. Well, let me finish this up. Just sort of. Well, actually, now that I think about it, it looks to me like it's really something you should take a look through. I'll give you the article. You should take a look at the data. It really kind of needs to be digested in reading more than having it read to you. But very interesting. So I definitely recommend it. I'll move on then to a couple of other topics, and there are about 50 that I wanted to get to, and I made some notes to myself about which ones I thought were most important. Let me do this one quickly. I think it's just a quick hit, but speaking as we were of the vote certifications in the various states, this just a weird note from the vote certification front. Our good friend NYC Southpaw taking note of this, finding the tweet of Holly Otterbein, a reporter from Politico, and let's see, and previously a reporter in Philadelphia, so I guess has some particular interest in what's going on in Pennsylvania, and that's what this is about. Holly reporting that the Luzerne County Board of Elections in Pennsylvania, and I think, where is Luzerne? Sort of like east central Pennsylvania, sort of, farmland, as I recall. I'll check up on it here before I give you, and we'll extend this short segment. All right, Luzerne County, just checking on this. I feel like it's a place I've passed through from time to time, seeing the signs. Yeah, okay, so like Wilkes-Barre area, I guess that would be probably the biggest town in the area. And so, yes, I have passed through it. And yeah, I guess a good description of it is east central Pennsylvania. So southwest of Scranton, northwest of Allentown, northeast of Harrisburg. Wilkes-Barre, if you know what we're talking about. Okay. But Luzerne County apparently had some weirdness going on. Here's what the weirdness is. Luzerne County's Board of Elections passes the motion to certify their vote by a vote of 3-2. The 3 Democrats on the board all voted yes to certify the election results, of course. 2 Republicans voted no. And I don't know if it's a 3-2. I don't know if there's 5 members of the board or whether there's 6 members of the board and someone abstained or something. But the deal is that, shouldn't surprise you. The Democrats voting yes, the Republicans voting no, until you find out that, as Southpaw points out, the county was won by Trump. Trump won the vote by 22,000 votes in the county, and yet the Republicans voted no on certifying the results. That's kind of how convinced they are that the thing to do, because President Trump says so, is to vote against certifying the vote because something is screwy somewhere. Even if it's not screwy by their count in Luzerne County, you'd think they'd be anxious to certify the vote for Trump in their county, but they're not, because they've been told that there's something, So here's more about what Greg Sargent is talking about the seriousness of undermining people's confidence in the system and people's confidence in votes and vote counting. Republicans are so convinced that there's something wrong with the system because Trump keeps saying it, and, contrary to all evidence, but, he's the president of the United States and whatever. So these people are like convinced that there's something wrong with the vote, even when the vote goes their way. So I don't know what to make of this. I just want to put it on record. It's something crazy to have to contemplate. Well, now you have to contemplate it. So go ahead and do that. Let's see. Other issues that I wanted to bring back to you. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yes. Democratic caucus elections in the House. I forgot to report to you. You may have seen the results already, but we went through our Moneyball style, quick and dirty estimation of who should win these leadership elections based on, of course, how much money their leadership PACs had handed out. And I just want to report for the record that on the question of whatever that fourth ranking spot was, it was an assistant speaker, or I can't remember which one it was. The contest between Catherine Clark and David Cicilline, and we took a look at their two PACs. Yeah, that's like a Tupac joke waiting to be made. Somebody else finish that joke, please. Catherine Clark with Fair Shot PAC and David Cicilline with DNC PAC that later morphed into Gun Safety PAC. Cicilline, the better known of the two, for me, had given out something in the neighborhood of $350,000, $430,000 for Catherine Clark. The results are in. They happened last week. Catherine Clark wins. So, there you have it. The money was the right prediction on that one. But hey, it's only one race. There was, of course, another race going on for another leadership positions. Again, I forget which one it was, but Pete Aguilar and Robin Kelly facing off against one another. And as I recall, let's see, it looked like the totals were very heavily in favor of Pete Aguilar, his having given out $212,000 in this election cycle to Robin Kelly's $9,500. 2018, he did another $95,000. Robin Kelly with $17,000. Back in the 2016 cycle, Kelly hadn't established her PAC yet. Aguilar had given out another $24,000. Lo and behold, Aguilar has won that race. So there's another race outstanding. So we went 2 for 2 on the Moneyball quick and dirty predictions. The quick and dirty prediction on DCCC chair, which is the next contest, and I think they're voting on that one this week. Sean Patrick Maloney and what is Cardenas's first name? I now forget what his first name is, but we better figure it out because the money game points to him for DCCC chair. It's an interesting contest, and this one I looked deeper into it because the money wasn't that decisive. I think it ran about $185,000 for Cardenas and $126,600 for Maloney. And in this case was kind of really unusual and interesting in that there was a lot of overlap between the two leadership PACs in terms of who they had given money to. I count here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 still current and will be serving in the next Congress. 25 members to whom both Maloney and Cardenas had given money. And in some cases, the same amount, too. So it was really very interesting. But a slight edge here to Cardenas in terms of the number of members that he has helped out and the amount of money he's given out over the years. So we'll go with that prediction and see if that one holds true. Oh, by the way, among the first people in the second election cycle in which Cardenas's leadership PAC participated in giving, that would be 2016, one of the people to whom he gave money was Sean Patrick Maloney. So I don't think Maloney is going to be voting for him. So it's not, in the strictest sense, absolutely predictive of how each member obviously is going to vote in all these things. But I thought that was of some interest. And also of some interest, there are a few others, there's a few other curveballs if you're really trying to get down to the who did they help and how much money did they get question. Occasionally there are bets made on the wrong horse. There are a lot of times where people give money to people in a primary and they end up backing someone in the primary who loses the primary, but then that Democrat, the other Democrat, wins the race, and they're sitting there in Congress, and they may or may not know, and may or may not remember that their opponent was backed by this person who is now seeking their vote. But usually that ends up getting corrected. If somebody was in a very competitive primary and someone with a leadership PAC gave to their opponent, they usually make that up to them later by giving them money as well, as a way of helping hold the seat, if nothing else. Anyway, I just thought that was of some interest. And I think the record of making predictions based on PAC giving, the ones that I've actually examined anyway, is, I think, might even be unbeaten. So it's a good one. Keep it in your back pocket. All right, let's see. Other things I wanted to share with you include an article I put away a while ago. It seems like a million years. Everything seems like it's a million years ago. From CNN is Dana Bash and Gloria Borger reporting this one on November 19th. I just thought it was interesting to just see it out in print. A theory on what the hell Trump was doing and what's motivating everything besides just, I just like to try to win or cheat any way I can. Trump told Ally he's trying to get back at Democrats for questioning legitimacy of his own election. There's a theory in there. Let me read through this for you. President Donald Trump told an ally he knows he lost, but that he's delaying the transition process and is aggressively trying to sow doubt about the election results in order to get back at Democrats for questioning the legitimacy of his election in 2016, especially with the Russia investigation. A source familiar with the president's thinking, such as it may be, told CNN last Thursday. That's pretty interesting as a theory. The president's refusal to concede, as CNN has previously reported, stems in part from his perceived grievance that Hillary Clinton and former President Barack Obama undermined his presidency by saying Russia interfered in the 2016 election and could have impacted the outcome, people around him have said. Trump continues to hold a grudge against those who he claims undercut his election by pointing to Russian interference efforts, and he has suggested it is fair game to not recognize Joe Biden as the president-elect, even though Clinton conceded on election night in 2016 and the Trump transition was able to begin immediately. Trump is also continuing to process the emotional scars of losing to a candidate he repeatedly said during the campaign was an unworthy opponent whose win would amount to humiliation. And then it happened and didn't know how to deal with it, I guess. He again made no public appearances on Thursday. Again, this is last week, skipping the first coronavirus task force briefing at the White House in more than 6 months. He's planning to participate in a virtual Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit Friday, a senior administration official told CNN. I don't know whether he did that or not. Trump has heard from a multitude of friends and business associates who have been urging him to at least let the transition begin, even if he doesn't want to concede. Another source who is also familiar with the president's thinking told CNN his answer, no, you're wrong. Absolutely wrong, according to one source. When Trump has been told to get Rudy Giuliani and other members of his legal team off the case, the president has disagreed, although apparently he spent much of yesterday trashing the legal team for some reason. He wants to continue the fight, and people close to the president have even expressed concern that he's buying into Giuliani's false claims that his legal efforts can change the election's outcome. He has shown no signs of backing down, even as those around him continue indicating that the end is near. Very interesting, all by itself. We have some light flickering going on here. That doesn't bode well for the continuance of the show. All right. Show no signs of backing down. Those allies have expressed worry that a sizable faction of the country thinks the election was stolen from Trump and that Biden isn't receiving national security briefings. The friends and associates, this source said, have been imploring the president to think about the future. He'll never do that. They've told him he's making it harder on himself, that he'll have a hard time getting people to stay at his hotels or even borrowing money if he continues his behavior. They know how to talk to him. He will hurt his brand, they have told him. The president thinks that's wrong. His response is that he has had more than 70 million people voting for him, which he thinks conveys ultimate power and authority, and should convey the White House as well. Biden leads, of course, by nearly 6 million votes and 306 electoral votes to Trump's 232. The most important thing we need to keep in mind is that Donald is in a unique position for him, said Mary Trump, the president's niece, who wrote a damning account of his family life. He's never in his life been in a situation that he can't get out of, either through using somebody else's money, using connections, or using power. And not only is he in a unique position, he's in the position of being a loser, which in my family, certainly, as far as my grandfather was concerned, was the worst possible thing you could be. Trump is listening to his friends, the source said, but hurriedly ends conversations because he disagrees. He doesn't want to hear what he doesn't believe. Inside the White House, it seems as if many people have decided to let this play out, either because they want to or because they have no choice. Son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner is playing it cool, this source said, while daughter Ivanka Trump has pretty much removed herself from this, as CNN reported last week. That ain't going to work, lady. Ivanka is well aware she has a business she might want to return to, or even a future political life, the source said. The president, this source said, doesn't see how bad the aftermath of all this could be for the country and for democracy itself. As usual, he's focused on himself, not COVID-19 or the transition. Trump has even been told there is no need to concede and to just let the transition proceed. Even this doesn't register, at least not yet, but I guess it did last night. In another week or 10 days, this source said it could be a different story, but he's still not ready now, if ever, to concede. As a matter of fact, that gives us a chance to read another thing I stored away in Pocket. I thought an interesting headline from Christina Cabrera at Talking Points memo. Headline being, Trump emphasizes how much he isn't conceding after GSA okays Biden transition. A defiant President Donald Trump made it clear Monday night that he plans to go down kicking and screaming, and I would love for him to go down amid some kicking and screaming, just not his, in the wake of his electoral loss, even after the GSA gave President-elect Joe Biden the green light to formally begin the transition process. And we should probably read, I don't know. You know the story about that they've gotten the green light. Okay, let's see. What does GSA being allowed to preliminarily work with the Dems have to do with continuing to pursue our various cases on what will go down as the most corrupt election in American political history? He griped in a tweet chock full of lies about the integrity of the election. We are moving full speed ahead. We'll never concede to fake ballots and, quote, Dominion. Dominion is the voting machine company name. But just to be clear on that, will never concede. It isn't we will never concede. It's not the contraction will. It's will. W-I-L-L. I will never concede to fake ballots and Dominion. They explain here. Dominion refers to the debunked far-right conspiracy theory alleging that the tech firm Dominion Voting Systems, which provides software to help states tabulate votes, had manipulated its software to sabotage the vote tallying process in Georgia and Michigan. Additionally, there is no evidence of fake ballots swaying the election, and the slew of lawsuits from Trump's legal team alleging mass voter fraud have consistently collapsed. I think I saw a headline somewhere, note to self to go look for it, that 5 Pennsylvania cases were dismissed yesterday as well. I didn't even realize there were still that many pending in Pennsylvania. Early on Monday, GSA Administrator Emily Murphy finally allowed the Biden transition team to begin its work and acknowledged the former vice president's electoral victory in the form of a sulky letter claiming she was, quote, never directly or indirectly pressured by the White House to withhold approval of the transition. Contrary to media reports and insinuations, my decision was not made out of fear or favoritism, Murphy wrote. Instead, I strongly believe that the statute requires that the GSA administrator ascertain, not impose, the apparent president-elect. Trump claimed shortly afterward via Twitter that he had recommended that the official send the letter, but insisted that his patently undemocratic attempt to steal the election from Biden through the courts, quote, strongly continues, which is not a way that it can continue. We will keep up the good fight. Or you haven't started anything that's good, but okay. And I believe we will prevail, he tweeted. He does not believe it, according to our previous article, but doesn't care and will continue anyway. So very interesting. Nothing new there, but I thought some interesting insight into what might be going on in his mind, why he was trying to do this thing, even if you thought that deep down he knew he had lost, why would he do it? Just for chaos? Yeah, sure, but also I think more like, well, they did it to me, and so I'm going to do it, whatever it is, to them. I think that's probably not incorrect, let's say. All right, let's see. I think this article, which sounds very interesting, might be one that is a little too long to get all the way through. Maybe not. So, look, good. This will rob me of a topic I wanted to talk about tomorrow, but that's okay. It's, I thought, an interesting headline here. How misinformation super spreaders, get it? Super spreaders, seed false election theories. New York Times writing this, or featuring this piece by Shira Frankel. Had a subheader here is, researchers have found that a small group of social media accounts are responsible for the spread of a disproportionate amount of the false posts about voter fraud. I think we all suspected that this might be the case. The next big question is, are they real people and are they Americans? But I don't know if this heads into this or not. Here's the deal. Borrowing the phrase, what was Obama's thing? Oh, let me be clear, right? Let me be clear. Here's the deal. Now, the Obama-Biden transition. On the morning of November 5th, Eric Trump, one of the president's sons, you know, that guy, asked his Facebook followers to report cases of voter fraud with the hashtag #StopTheSteal. His post was shared over 5,000 times. An interesting thing that they're doing here in the Times graphically. They are embedding that Facebook entry, but they're doing so with a big red slash through it, like to indicate this is not a true thing, so that it doesn't just perpetuate the false information. It's just interesting graphically. By late afternoon, the conservative media personalities Diamond and Silk, who are still alive, by the way, and went to the Super Spreader event, and I don't even think they're sick, so they got away with one there. Good luck to them. Diamond and Silk had shared the hashtag by late afternoon, along with a video claiming voter fraud in Pennsylvania. Their post was shared over 3,800 times. It is embedded herein, and notably the people in the video are extremely white, but okay. Again, with the red slash through it. That night, the conservative activist Brandon Straka, never heard of him, asked people to protest in Michigan under the banner "Stop the Steal" with the hashtag and all. His post was shared more than 3,700 times. And quite honestly, that doesn't really feel like viral level, but it is an awful lot of shares. Once again, with the red slash through it. Over the next week, the phrase "Stop the Steal" was used to promote dozens of rallies that spread false voter fraud claims about the U.S. presidential elections. New research from Avaaz, a global human rights group. We've called that name before, a long time ago, though. AVAAZ, right? The Elections Integrity Partnership, joining them in this, and the New York Times, shows how a small group of people, mostly right-wing personalities with outsized influence on social media, helped spread the false voter fraud narrative that led to those rallies. That group, like the guests of a large wedding held during the pandemic, were super spreaders of misinformation around voter fraud, seeding falsehoods that include the claims that dead people voted, voting machines had technical glitches, and that mail-in ballots were not correctly counted. Because of how Facebook's algorithm functions, these super spreaders are capable of priming a discourse, said Fadi Quran, a director at Avaz. There is often this assumption that misinformation or rumors just catch on. These super spreaders show that there is an intentional effort to redefine the public narrative. Across Facebook, there were roughly 3.5 million interactions, including likes, comments, and shares on public posts referencing Stop the Steal during the week of November 3rd, according to the research. Of those, the profiles of Eric Trump, Diamond and Silk, and Mr. Straka accounted for a disproportionate share, roughly 6%, or 200,000 of those interactions. While the group's impact was notable, it did not come close to the spread of misinformation promoted by President Trump since then. Of the 20 most engaged Facebook posts over the last week containing the word election, all were from Mr. Trump, according to CrowdTangle, a Facebook-owned analytics tool. All of those claims were found to be false or misleading by independent fact-checkers. The baseless election fraud claims have been used by the president and his supporters to challenge the vote in a number of states. Reports that malfunctioning voting machines, intentionally miscounted mail-in votes, and other irregularities affected the vote were investigated by elections officials and journalists who found no evidence of widespread voter fraud. The voter fraud claims have continued to gather steam in recent weeks, thanks in large part to prominent accounts. A look at the 4-week period starting in mid-October shows that President Trump and the top 25 super spreaders of voter fraud misinformation accounted for 28.6% of the interactions people had with that content, according to an analysis by Avaz. What we see these people doing is kind of like setting a fire down with fuel. It is designed to quickly create a blaze, Mr. Quran said. These actors have built enough power, they ensure this misinformation reaches millions of Americans. In order to find the super spreaders, Avaz compiled a list of 95,546 Facebook posts that included narratives about voter fraud. Those posts were liked, shared, or commented on nearly 60 million times by people on Facebook. Avaz found that just 33 of the 95,546 posts were responsible for over 13 million of those interactions. Wow. Those 33 posts had created a narrative that would go on to shape what millions of people thought about the legitimacy of U.S. elections. A spokesman for Facebook said, "You should murder us all." The spokesman for Facebook said the company had added labels to posts that misrepresented the elections process and was directing people to a voting information center. Thank you so much. We're taking every opportunity, they said, to connect people to reliable information about the election and how votes are being counted, said Kevin McAllister, a Facebook spokesman. It's obviously not working very well, but okay. The company has not commented on why accounts that repeatedly share misinformation, such as Mr. Straka's and Diamond and Silk's, have not been penalized. Facebook has previously said that President Trump, along with other elected officials, is granted special status and isn't fact-checked. Many of the super spreader accounts had millions of interactions on their Facebook posts over the last month and have enjoyed continued growth. Isn't that odd how that happens? Let's see. Where do we leave off here? The accounts were active on Twitter, of course, as well as on Facebook, and increasingly spread the same misinformation on new social media sites like Parler, MeWe, and Gab. I don't know what any of those really are, but Dan Bongino, the right-wing commentator with a following of nearly 4 million people on Facebook, had over 7.7 million interactions on Facebook the week of November 3rd. Mark Levin, a right-wing radio host, had nearly 4 million. Diamond and Silk, 2.5 million. A review of their pages by the Times shows that a majority of their posts have focused on the recent elections and the voter fraud narratives around them. None of the super spreaders identified in this article responded to requests for comment. Of course, that's not likely to happen. There's a bit more that I'm not going to be able to get to before the end of our show today, but I recommend the article to you. I just wanted to sort of introduce the possibility that a lot of this could be fixed with minimal intervention, really, by Facebook. They just don't want to do it. And at any rate, no word on how many, if any of them, are in fact bots or trolls or anything like that, but they are pretty adept at finding the buttons to push, and I wouldn't be terribly surprised if the original idea came from those sources and then spread to the super spreaders who then did the job of lighting the fire. Anyway, time to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next here on Networks Radio. Do stay tuned, because there's still a lot more information out there that hasn't been given his take.
From networksradio.com.
Or yours. Stay tuned and let him know.
You've been listening to Kagro in the morning.
Right, complain to him and say
David Waldman.
All right, what's he got on tap here? Let's see. How about this? General Motors flipped to California's side in the state's fight against Trump to set its own fuel standards. A nice indication of things to come under the Biden administration. This and, of course, much, much more. Justice has his own take on all of it next, and we'll see you tomorrow.